The work of a madman.
13 wounded, 7 dead, including himself. Barbara Walters' exclusive one-on-one interview with his father, reliving that night.
I'll tell you the story, Barbara.
Chilling details you've never heard until now about a loner obsessed with finding a girlfriend.
I mean, look at me. I'm gorgeous. But you girls don't see it.
Then obsessed with turning on the world when he couldn't.
Did you take him to Las Vegas hoping that he would lose his virginity?
All new revelations from his Day of Retribution video.
I will have my revenge against all of you.
And the manifesto he called My Twisted World.
You were the only one he didn't talk about wanting to kill.
And you'll hear from a survivor who looked him in the eye and lived to tell.
I've never actually looked in the face of the devil.
As well as the families of the victims. What do they want to say to him? Tonight, The Secret Life of Elliot Rodger.
How do you mourn a child whom others vilify?
Here now, David Muir and Elizabeth Vargas.
Tonight, a 2020 exclusive about something that was happening exactly 5 weeks ago at this very hour. An 8-minute drive-by massacre that was actually years in the making.
And Elizabeth, right here tonight, as you know, the father of that young killer speaking out only to Barbara Walters. As you know, Barbara retired from hosting The View, but said she'd return on special assignment for us. And tonight, she's back.
Well, I thank you, David and Elizabeth, because tonight this is special. It's a milestone. The very first time that a parent of a mass murderer has ever spoken on television. Peter Rodger tells us he is doing this to show other parents the warning signs that he missed and what changes we desperately need in the mental health care system so that no one has to go through the night that changed his life and so many others forever. On a quiet Memorial Day weekend, Peter Rodger and his wife were hurtling down the highway from Los Angeles to Santa Barbara. It was a 100-mile journey of terror.
I have to save my son. I have to get to Santa Barbara now.
Peter Rodger had just seen a disturbing video that his son Elliot had posted on YouTube.
I hate all of you. I can't wait to give you exactly what you deserve. Utter annihilation.
What went through your mind?
I can only describe like a really dark force of horrible energy that hit me.
What were your fears for him?
I felt for his life. I didn't know what he was doing, and then suddenly he's saying he's going to do other things to other people. I was confused. I just wanted to go and find him and talk to him. I mean, we were driving up there not knowing what to do, trying to get information.
Peter Rodger was on a mission to prevent a massacre, but halfway to his destination, suddenly he heard the reports.
Breaking news right now out of Isla Vista, where we are getting reports of a shooting.
There are unconfirmed reports that there may be as many as 3 victims, possibly a fatality.
The death toll could be climbing.
Shots fired. Did you know that this was your son, the shooter?
No. God, good Lord, no. We were just driving up there in absolute fear for him and confusion.
Witnesses say a BMW with 2 people inside had people open fire and also run over people.
I was hearing, reports of a black BMW, and I was going, oh, no, no, no. And we were on the phone at the same time to the police, and they were saying, we don't have any information for you, no information.
The driver of that BMW was his 22-year-old son, Elliot.
Santa Barbara County Sheriff Bill Brown is calling the mass shooting the work of a madman, but say at this time the threat appears to be over and the suspect is dead.
7 people died that night, including the shooter, Elliot Rodger. 13 others were hospitalized. For Peter Rodger, those memories are a waking nightmare. How are you?
Every night I go to sleep, I wake up and I think of those young men and young women that have died and that were injured and were terrorized. And my son did that.
When you wake up in the morning, what do you think?
It's like a reverse nightmare situation. When you go to sleep normally, you have a nightmare and you wake up and, oh, everything's okay.
Yeah.
Now I go to sleep, I might have a nice dream. And then I wake up and then slowly the truth of what happened dawns on me, and that is that my son was a mass murderer. And then I think about the victims, and I think about what he did, and I'm trying to process it.
But who was the young man behind the rampage, and why did he do it?
Hi, Elliot Rodger here.
Were there clues in the disturbing jigsaw of videos he left behind? And what were his 137-page so-called manifesto reveal about the private agony of a psychotic mind? Its title, My Twisted World.
This is the story of how I, Elliot Rodger, came to be. It is a story of a war against cruel injustice. This tragedy did not have to happen, but humanity forced my hand.
Elliot Rodger was born in London and was brought to America at the age of 5. His Malaysian-born mother, Lee Chin, was a unit nurse in the movie Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. His father directed television commercials and worked on the hit film Hunger Games. In the beginning, Elliot had a seemingly normal childhood.
He was adorable. He would laugh so much that sometimes we were worried he would choke. It was really wondrous, those first 4-5 years of his life. It was wondrous.
You loved Elliot.
I loved Elliot.
Elliot loved you.
Yeah.
But at the age of 7, Elliot's parents got divorced. 1 year later, his father had remarried. This time to Moroccan-born Samaya Akabon, an actress who appeared in the Hollywood blockbuster Green Zone. It was during those years that 7-year-old Elliot began his long treatment in therapy. Why did you think he needed it?
When we realized he had social issues, we brought therapists in to try and help him integrate into society.
Did he have trouble with other children, with
Yes.
making friends? He did.
He had very few friends in elementary school because he was a very, 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 very shy boy. And we just felt that that was his issue.
On the surface, Elliot seemed destined for a life of success and privilege. Peter Rodger's work gave his son access to Hollywood's elite. From an early age, it was a world he longed to join.
My little 9-year-old self realized that there were hierarchies, that some people were better than others. Jealousy and envy. Those are two feelings that would dominate my entire life and bring me immense pain.
By any standard, the Rodger family was living the good life, but those tantalizing glimpses into Hollywood's inner circle would always leave Elliot resentful and wanting more. Did he blame you for the fact that he wasn't a rich kid?
He just had illusions of grandeur. Even if he couldn't make it himself, he wanted to feel in a position where we would somehow provide it for him.
The relationship that Elliot shared with his father had always been complicated. Peter Elliot was the Mount Everest his son could never reach. You are a very good-looking man. Did he realize that? Did that please him? Was he...
He was jealous of me the way that I looked.
The shy young boy harbored fear and self-doubt. His parents moved him from school to school, hoping but never succeeding to help Elliot fit in. There was some question about whether Elliot was autistic.
He was never formally diagnosed, and there was a suggestion that he might have been high-functioning Asperger's. And, you know, these were because of traits. For instance, there was a certain OCD about him. There was a certain, you know, like he'd always put his plate in the same place. He'd like to wear the same clothes every day. Elliot really was a very high-functioning human being. If he was sitting here right now, you would think what a polite boy he was, but yet he had this thing going on inside of him.
What his parents didn't know was that Elliot, even at the age of 10, was hiding a secret that would someday transform a shy young child into a cold-blooded killer.
This is the horror story. This is the American horror story, or the world's horror story, is when you have somebody who on the outside is one thing and on the inside is something completely different, and you don't see it.
Next, did his parents not see the warning signs hiding in plain sight?
There's a certain pattern.
And you missed it.
When 2020 returns. '20 continues. Once again, Barbara Walters.
When the story about Elliot's shooting spree first broke, the videos and so-called manifesto he left behind provide a rare glimpse into a mind broken by mental illness.
Oh, check it out. There's me.
At first glance, Elliot Rodger seemed like any other college-age kid.
Look at how fabulous I look.
Bragging about designer clothes.
Worth $300. Giorgio Armani.
Posing for selfies scored to retro pop. But the path Elliot was walking took him to the dark side of his mind.
My problem is girls. I desire girls. But girls are not sexually attracted to me. It's not fair. It's not fair.
But why did those closest to him fail to see any warning signs when it seemed clear that Elliot was mentally disturbed? People have called your son evil. How would you describe Elliot?
Elliot was far from evil. Something happened to him. And then I think he became very mentally ill. What I don't get is we didn't see this coming at all. None of us.
But there were clues hidden in those early years that Peter Rodger now admits he missed. The lonely young boy had grown into an introverted teenager. By the age of 13, he had walled himself into a cyber world. His constant companions, the characters in the video game World of Warcraft. In high school, Elliot was a loner, bullied by his peers. They threw food at him during lunch and shoved him into lockers.
I was an innocent, scared little boy trapped in a jungle full of malicious predators, and I was shown no mercy.
He was afraid of boys and girls.
He felt he had an inability to get along with them. And this is when we realized that he had a real fear of other human beings, of other kids his age.
Elliot fled from 2 high schools before finding refuge at a tiny 100-student school called Independence High, a school with a mission to help troubled children, like the boy they called our Elliot.
There was never a time in working with him or knowing him that I ever felt like his inability to interact socially would ever have led me to believe that this kind of rage was building inside of him. Never.
But the isolation hit a firestorm of frustration and anger. Its target during those teen years was sex.
Finding out about sex is one of the things that truly destroyed my entire life. Sex. The very word fills me with hate. I would always covet it. I would always fantasize about it, but I would never get it.
Elliot had always been fascinated and repelled by sex. His first glimpse of pornography horrified him.
I couldn't imagine human beings doing such things with each other. The sight was shocking and arousing. I was quite shaken for a few days.
Did you talk to Elliot about sex?
Yeah.
What did you say?
How it's so important to present yourself as a human being from the heart outwards and not to be weird. And I say weird because it is weird when you think girls are going to throw themselves at you.
As a teenager, he described his interest in girls, but he said, I'm quoting again, "There is no way I could ever get them, and so my starvation began." Did he talk about this?
He was always obsessive about this one issue.
Obsessive about which issue?
About not
Finding
getting a
your
girlfriend. But here's the thing, according to this journal and according to his acts, he was already planning heinous things in response to this emotional thing in his head that none of us could really see.
Elliot was tormented by the sight of pretty girls and public affection. Even his favored haven at the Griffith Park Observatory became a reminder of failure.
I don't understand you girls. It's like your sexual attraction is flawed. It's perverted. You're attracted to the wrong kind of guy. You should be attracted to guys like me. Beautiful, magnificent guys.
I saw sex as an evil and barbaric act, all because I wasn't able to have it. This was the major turning point. If I can't have it, I will destroy it.
If Elliot had had the sex that he says he wanted so much, would things have been different?
I don't think so, because I think he had a condition. He had a very seriously advanced mental condition, and I think that whatever would have happened, even if he got a girlfriend, wouldn't have been able to have made him into the happy human being we wanted him to be.
Did you take him to Las Vegas hoping that he would lose his virginity?
No, I suggested to him that perhaps, you know, if his blocking point was having sex, then perhaps, you know, in Las Vegas there might be an opportunity where it's legal for him to have sex.
But he didn't want to go?
He didn't want to go because he wanted to be loved for his heart. Retrospectively, I think it wouldn't have helped at all.
It wouldn't have?
No, because retrospectively I realized how sick he was.
But you know you can have these same things and not have another Elliot. You can have kids who are frustrated and don't have girlfriends or boyfriends or, you know.
No, but when you put the combination together, there's a certain pattern. And I think it's important to talk about those patterns.
And you missed it.
Yeah, too right, I missed it. I wish I could turn the clock back for the victims, for our family, for all of the scars out there.
By the time Elliot reached his 18th birthday, the shy young boy had vanished, leaving only resentment and anger. Too terrified to approach young women, it was easier to hate them.
That's a problem that I intend to rectify. I, in all my magnificence and power, I will not let this fly. It's an injustice that needs to be dealt with.
Next, planting the seeds of a master plot for his day of retribution.
I mean, look at me. I'm gorgeous. But you girls don't see it.
And maybe the biggest miss of all that led to the massacre, when 2020 returns. We return to the secret life of Elliot Rodger. Once more, Barbara Walters.
For Elliot Rodger, Santa Barbara was the picture-perfect version of his ideal life.
There were hot blonde girls walking around everywhere. If I can't get laid there, then there is no hope for me at all.
At 19, Elliot was stuck in a cycle of isolation and depression. His parents thought college life would give him a fresh start. You thought that he would have the coping skills to live alone.
I thought that by putting him out there and giving him independence and integrating him into a normal society would very quickly help develop the skills that I thought was lacking in him.
Did you inform anyone, either at the college or the parents of his roommates, that he had mental problems?
I didn't see any reason to, because as far as I was concerned, he wasn't a threat to himself or anybody else.
But left to his own devices, Elliot Rodger's behavior would soon escalate from strange to savage. Simon Astaire is a longtime friend of Peter's.
I got a sense of a boy who was unable to communicate.
So there were signs, you thought, of maladjustment?
He was unable to engage, and it was difficult to engage. And I saw lots of people trying to engage with him.
I don't understand why you're so repulsed by me.
Soon the old resentments would return. Enraged by the sight of young lovers, he acted out for the first time, throwing coffee on one kissing couple at Starbucks.
I had never struck back at my enemies before, and I felt a small sense of spiteful gratification for doing so.
Feeding on that fulfillment, his thoughts began to take a more diabolical and dangerous turn. The day of retribution had been born.
It was only when I first moved to Santa Barbara that I started considering the possibility of having to carry out a violent act of revenge as the final solution to dealing with all the injustices I've had to face at the hands of women and society.
His anger, now targeted at women, drew him to misogynistic websites, online forums where he once wrote, "Start envisioning a world where women fear you." He sent you links to these websites.
I was disgusted and I called him up and I said, "Elliot, why are you going on these websites? This is negative, this is evil, and you shouldn't go on that."
But that didn't work.
It didn't work. And I had no idea that he had such an inbred hatred, this misogyny.
But despite his deepening hatred of women, Elliot told his father that he was obsessed about losing his virginity.
I would say to him, there is no shame at all in not losing your virginity at a later age. Some people never do. Some people go into the church and choose chastity.
He would say, "I can't get a girlfriend"?
He would say, "They're never going to like me because I'm not 6'2", a jock, sporty guy." He did say to me once, "I wish I wasn't half Asian." I never realized that he was so racist.
Thinking, "Why aren't I white?"
Correct.
Elliot's life had become a volatile mixture of desire and denial. And last summer, yet another sign of violence. Frustrated after being ignored by girls at a party, he tried to shove them off a 10-foot ledge.
He got into an altercation verbally with a couple of girls, and then he was picked on, and then he was thrown off the balcony.
But it turns out that he was trying to push girls off the ledge.
In 2020 hindsight, I can imagine that might have been the case, and that upsets me to the core of my heart. He was such a good liar. He was such an incredible liar.
Perhaps Elliot was even lying to himself, repeatedly refusing the advice of therapists, at least one of whom had recommended medication.
But Elliot would say, "I'm not sick, I'm not going to take that." And because he was of an adult age, he refused to not only take that medication, but refused to go back to see that particular doctor.
Would the medication have made a difference?
According to his doctor, it would have made a hell of a lot of difference.
There are people who say that a father with a mentally unstable son should not have allowed Elliot to live on his own.
I didn't know I had a mentally unstable son. I had no idea. He had a secret life that he became incredibly brilliant at hiding.
Hey, Elliot Rodger here.
But that secret life was spinning out of control.
There's me, all my fabulousness.
With no official diagnosis of mental illness, he bought not one, but 3 handguns. Elliot had launched his plan for Retribution Day.
As I fired my first few rounds, I felt so sick to my stomach. There I was, practicing shooting with real guns because I had a plan to carry out a massacre. Why did things have to be this way?
It's my place of refuge.
Then a pivotal moment when Elliot's plot might have been completely foiled. His mother finding one of those bizarre videos on YouTube.
My life is so lonely and mundane.
She wanted to have a mental assessment of him. It just turns out that there is no way that you can actually do that unless he voluntarily does it or unless he commits a crime.
Did Elliot volunteer? Would he have done it?
No.
He didn't.
Of course not.
She alerted the police. Yes, and what happened?
323 to 58.
6 officers arrived at Elliot's apartment and knocked on the door. And Elliot was a very, very polite, kind, well-spoken, well-dressed individual. And he managed to say, "We've got nothing to worry about."
If they had demanded to search my room, that would have ended everything. For a few horrible seconds, I thought it was all over.
But the police neither watched the YouTube videos nor ran a background check for purchasing guns.
And this is where the system, I think, failed. If somebody's going to do a welfare check surely they should do a gun check on the way, because how's somebody going to do something to themselves if they feel they're a danger? It takes 90 seconds to do a gun check, and his whole scheme would have been over and thwarted. I'd like to make something very, very clear though, Barbara. I'm really not pointing any fingers whatsoever at the Santa Barbara Police Department.
That was the turning point between life and death, a missed moment that began the countdown to Elliot's day of retribution.
Well, this is my last video. It all has to come to this. The day in which I will have my revenge against humanity, against all of you.
Next, 3 years of planning, finally becoming 8 minutes of madness.
Frank 25 gunshot turn. The black BMW.
Witnesses, survivors.
He shot and I just felt the wind pass right by my face.
And the surprise murders he didn't go through with. When we return.
May 23rd, 2014. The sun was setting on a quiet spring night, the campus half empty over the Memorial Day weekend. But the lives of those who were there would never be the same.
Hours before, we were having a great time. It was a nice day outside. It was sunny, you know.
After 3 years of meticulous planning, Elliot Rodger's deranged mind brought him to what he called the day of retribution.
The day in which I will have my revenge against humanity, against all of you.
His parents were having dinner in Los Angeles with friends. They had plans to see Elliot the next day.
He was due to come on Saturday for lunch, the day after the 24th.
Do you think he already knew what he was going to do?
Yeah, after reading the journals, yeah, I do.
What Elliot's journal revealed was a master plan of carnage.
I will drive down to my father's house to kill my little brother, denying him of the chance to grow up to surpass me, along with my stepmother, Sumaya, as she will be in the way. My father will be away on one of his business trips, so thankfully, I won't have to deal with him.
I was meant to have a meeting in London, and he wanted to know the dates.
Why?
He wanted me out of town so that he could come and murder his brother. And Sumaya, I think he was scared that he would hesitate, and I can understand that.
The only thing that saved his family's lives was a change in Peter's schedule.
My wife and Jazz, my 9-year-old, are still alive because of that.
What Peter Rodger didn't know was that his son had already murdered 3 people that night. His 2 roommates, David Wang and James Hong, and their visiting friend, George Chen. They had been brutally stabbed to death in Elliot's beachside apartment. Hours later, at 9:17 p.m., Elliot emailed his manifesto to friends, his therapist, and his parents.
I will specifically target the good-looking people and all of the couples.
Now he was a predator in search of the rest of his prey.
I'll be a god, exacting my retribution, just for the crime of living a better life than me.
His black BMW slowed down by a sorority, Alpha Phi. Elliot knocked at the door. No answer. Then he got back in his car and opened fire on the girls in front of Alpha Phi.
33 for the Frank unit, code 33.
2 of the women were dead on arrival of the deputies. One of them was very seriously injured with multiple gunshots.
Frank 25 gunshots from the area.
At the sheriff's dispatch center, the calls poured in like rain.
And we have 3 down on the corner of Segovia. The black BMW, 3 ambulances here.
Almost simultaneously, we received notification that another individual had been shot.
In response for multiple gunshot victims in front of the Ivy Deli.
At the Isla Vista Deli, just up the street.
Dylan Fontius had just entered the deli.
I heard the glass breaking, just the shatter of the glass. And that's when we all started scrambling for our life.
When Christopher Martinez came in for a sandwich, he was cut down in a hail of gunfire.
Shots fired, shots fired.
I just turned, I saw him fall. I kind of like took my hand off my head and turned down and ducked behind the counter. We sat there and watched this kid bleed to death. He was no less than 2 feet away from me.
But the rampage was far from over.
25 gunshots heard in the area. The deadly shooting in Isla Vista with multiple victims.
At least 3 people have been shot.
All of a sudden, sirens start going, ambulances start going. Multiple places, multiple people.
The death toll could be climbing.
He went up to the top of the loop. Firing, he shot 3 more victims.
I'll take to the streets of Isla Vista and slay every single person I see there.
He then confronted another young woman and pointed his gun at her.
At first, Sierra Schwartz thought the gun was a toy.
He shot, and I just felt the wind like pass right by my face, and I was like, what the f? So I turned around and I started like walking really fast the other way.
The deadly BMW was swerving erratically through the streets.
People were like, they're shooting,
drawing gunfire from officers.
He fired rounds at the deputy sheriff, and the deputy sheriff replied with 1 round of gunfire.
About 8 to 12 shots, just super fast, what sounded like directly below my balcony.
That black BMW plowed its way over pedestrians.
Some guy ran in our house bleeding everywhere. He said he got run over by a car.
There was carnage and chaos everywhere.
As many as 7 victims taken to the hospital.
But after deputies fired on him for the second time, Elliot's car spun out of control.
3 of the deputies returned fire and struck the vehicle.
Witnesses say they heard a single shot from inside the car. The long night's journey into terror had finally come to a close. Did Elliot kill himself, or did the police kill him?
What I gather is that he was shot in the hip and then he took his own life.
How did you learn that your son was the shooter?
The sheriff came in, and I'll remember this moment for the rest of my life. The way, he just looked me in the eye and he said, we found a deceased person and we found a license in his pocket that fits your son's description. And I went, oh. And I didn't know that he was the perpetrator then. I thought he was a victim. I thought he was a victim.
A search of Elliot's BMW revealed an arsenal, 3 semi-automatic weapons, and 400 bullets. Elliot had been ready for Armageddon.
Who would have thought my life will turn out this way? I didn't start this war, but I will finish it by striking back. Finally, at long last, I can show the world my true worth.
In the end, 7 people lost their lives. 13 were wounded. It took less than 8 minutes to transform 1 square mile of suburbia into a killing field.
I've never actually literally looked in the face of the devil, which is just terrifying.
In life, Elliot Rodger had passed almost invisible to everyone around him. Who would have known to stop the quiet boy hiding a monster within?
He lived like a 20-second walk from my house, and I'd never seen the kid in my life. We went to the same school, we ate at all the same places, but just another face in the crowd.
Next.
We have heard from the families of some of the victims, and they resent my interviewing you because they hold you responsible in part for their children's death.
Would you feel the same way? Let us know on Twitter. Use the hashtag ABC2020. When we return. "2020 continues. Once again, Barbara Walters.
Isla Vista, a picturesque college community, was shattered by grief.
I just don't know why this happened to our son. It's crazy. This just doesn't make any sense.
Her son, George Chen, was only 19.
We would die 100 times, 1,000 times, but we don't want our kids to get hurt.
A junior at UC Santa Barbara, George Chen was visiting his friends David Wang and James Hong, who are Elliot Rodger's roommates. The boys dreamed of one day starting a computer business together. And there are the two sorority sisters headed home that night from a day of senior week activities, excited about the summer ahead and looking forward to a future that will now never come. Catherine Cooper dreamed of being a museum curator.
She was very bubbly, and she had that smile that she just made you smile, and she was like the brightest girl in the room.
Her math whiz sorority sister, Veronica Weiss, was described as wise beyond her 19 years.
If it had been somebody else, she'd be the one here picking us up right now. Sorry.
Have you reached out to the victims, to the families?
I haven't reached out to them because I think that they needed to have space and time, and I think it would have been inappropriate.
Chin Rodger, Elliot's mother, has chosen to remain silent, instead telling us in a statement, "I feel the world's attention should be focused on supporting the victims' loved ones and remembering the beautiful lives that were so tragically lost." We have heard from the families of some of the victims, and they resent my interviewing you because they hold you responsible in part for their children's death. What do you say to them?
I wish I could turn back the clock. I wish that these families didn't have to go through this terrible ordeal. It's very hard for them to understand that I didn't know the monster that was in my son.
But one parent did reach out. Just weeks after that night, Rodger met with Richard Martinez, two fathers embracing, searching for common ground.
It was the most moving meeting I've ever had in my life.
Martinez's son Christopher was 20 years old when he became the last of Elliot Rodger's victims, shot as he was entering that deli. He was an only child?
He was our only child.
Your only child.
Yes. He was quiet, kind, humble, graceful, funny, and at the same time one of the most competitive people you would ever meet.
In the aftermath of his tragic loss, Martinez made an impassioned speech blaming the NRA for his son's death.
They talk about gun rights. What about Chris's right to live? When will this insanity stop? When will enough people say, we don't have to live like this? Too many have died. We should say to ourselves, not one more. Thank you. That's it.
I would like to introduce you to Richard Martinez.
Martinez is spending his time now focusing on a campaign to bring about what he calls common sense laws to reduce gun violence.
No parent should have to go through this. The only thing I have left, really, is to try to find some meaning in my son's death.
Like Martinez, Peter Rodger also has a mission. Why did you decide that you would speak out?
The only reason I'm here is to tell his story, to try and stop this happening again.
What do you hope that it will accomplish?
I think that there's an awful lot that can be done in this country to help families that might have another Elliot. There are holes in the mental health system, and I think that that's really got to be looked at.
In death as in life, his relationship with his son remains complicated. The family of Adam Lanza have said that they wished that their son had never been born. Do you ever feel that way?
That's a loaded question, Barbara.